This is on page 106, Din, restoration of justice. So it says you should return our judges and our counselors as of old, remove groaning and sorrow, because we said that without justice we don't have peace, and you don't have peace, nothing. Bracha, blessing is not possible. And you should reign over us alone. So, I see there's two things after this. Yeah, you should reign over us alone. Now, if you're asking for the restoration of the judges, so what does it mean you're going to reign over us alone? Sounds like the judges are going to reign over us. And this is an example of where you describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu as accomplishing something in the world indirectly. We are going to have human judges. We're not going to have prophecy in place of judgment. Those who are the scholars, masters of Torah, are going to be the judges. But we're asking that they should act only in the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. They should be totally dedicated only to dispensing the justice that the Torah prescribes for a particular case, so that through them, they will be the ones to act out HaKadosh Baruch Hu's control of the world. Not always do we describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu acting indirectly. Sometimes we want him to act directly. But in this case, we want it to be clear that although they are the ones who are pronouncing the verdict, they're not doing it in their own name. They're doing it in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're asking that their service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in pronouncing the verdict should be perfect. That's one thing. Another thing was, I skipped over this last time. The last words before the closing, v'tzadkenu b'mishpat. Now, tzedek is like justice, righteousness, doing things straight in a proper fashion. Now it's tzadkenu, make us tzedek. Tzedek us. That's the way you would say in colloquial Hebrew. Tzedek us. So the question is, what exactly does that mean? So, if you take it, how do they translate it here? I can't see. Justify us through judgment. Well, that's just as ambiguous as the Hebrew. So that's an accomplishment. Can it mean that there's going to be a process of judgment, and we're asking that in that process of judgment, we should come out justified? I mean, either we are or we aren't. We do expect the process of judgment to be true, realistic, honest. So if we aren't justified, if we don't deserve it, we're not asking to get a false verdict. That would be dumb, asking the Creator to give a false verdict. So the other way to learn it is the word, the beis, ba mishpat, can mean using mishpat as a tool, as a means, as a process to make us justified. When you think of a court of law, especially if you think of two litigants coming in, you think of conflict. We said that at the beginning. That's why you want to ask for compromise so that people will accept the verdict. Otherwise, someone's going to be disappointed. But it doesn't always work that way. It's not always that A says to B, you owe me money, and B says, no, I don't. Sometimes both A and B don't know what the din is, and they come to the court to find out what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah wants from them, and when the court tells them, they're happy to do it. They just don't know what needs to be done. I had this a number of years ago. We had a leak in the flooring on the roof, on the merpeset, the porch, and it was leaking down to the tenants below. And the question was, who has to pay to fix it? And I looked up the Gemara, and I looked up the commentaries, and the official law. It seemed to me that they had to pay for it. I called up a Dayan, someone who knows these laws well. He said to me, you read correctly, you interpreted everything correctly, but the custom is you pay, so you pay. So, okay, that's what the Torah wants from me, and I paid it. So not always do you have controversy. Even if you have controversy, one would hope that underneath the controversy, the people believe and trust the Torah and its judges, so that when they get a judgment, following that judgment will make them justified. The process of judgment will cause them to be justified. Tzadkenu b'mishpat. I think that is an acceptable way to read the words. I think it has a very profound message. It's a little bit like when the Torah describes the exile in Egypt, and the verse there says, "Vayareu osanu hamitzrim," and the normal translation is, the Egyptians did evil to us. They did bad things to us. One of the commentators says, you should read it this way, they made us evil. They eviled us. So again, in English, if you put it that way, you capture the ambiguity. They eviled us can mean they did evil to us, or they eviled us can mean they made us evil. And that commentator says, how did they get the leverage to actually do evil things to us? They got that leverage by first corrupting us, first degrading us, so that we lost our status of being good and pure and clean and pristine. And then, because we lost our status, that's how they were able to do evil things to us. So here similarly, I think Tzadkenu b'mishpat, a good way of reading it is, let the process of mishpat make us justified.
The process of mishpat is defined as this earth, on this earth?
Yes. We're talking here about restoring the judges so that they should... By the way, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in building, you talk about justifying something that's put up by you put a thing with water with an air bubble, and you can tell whether it's level or not. Mm-hmm. So to justify it means to make sure it's level, and if it isn't, you correct it to make it level. It's also you make it just to justify. Okay, now I want, before I go on, I want to go back to one just to make a comment. We talked about the blessing for health. We talked about preventative medicine as in addition to healing. I want to know what you think. So this comes up sometimes when I teach it here. Someone says, Rabbi, I'm healthy. So why should I be asking for health? I am healthy. What would you say if somebody asked that question?
Probably say, what makes you so certain that your health will continue?
Okay, that's number one. For yourself, instead of saying I am healthy, what you should say is I have been healthy. But that doesn't guarantee the next moment. It's not in your pocket. You don't own it. This is very similar to something that the Rabbi said when talking about the manna, which fell every morning except for Shabbos morning, and when you finished eating the day's manna at night, you had nothing. You had nothing. So the Gemara says someone who worries about where tomorrow's food is going to come from is of little faith. He has little trust in the Kodesh Baruch Hu, because he told you it's going to fall every day. That's the normal way of taking the Talmud statement that he who worries about tomorrow's food is of little faith. The Rabbi said, there's another aspect here. He's only worried about tomorrow's food. Why? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because this morning he picked up the manna, and the manna is in his pots, so he's got it in the kitchen. No, it's not guaranteed in the kitchen either. The fact that it's in your pot doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Not guaranteed it'll stay there, not guaranteed it won't be stolen, not guaranteed that you will be healthy enough to eat it. No, he's of small faith because he doesn't put the Kodesh Baruch Hu into the picture of the things that he has in his pots. That's the Kotzker was very sharp and deep. So that's the idea here, that number one, that the person says, I'm healthy, I don't need it. Okay, that's one answer. There's another answer based on the structure of the whole thing, which we mentioned a couple of times. What else could you say to him? Why do you think you're praying only for yourself? All the prayers are in plural. They're all we, us, not I. We said this, that the prayer is really for the sake of the Jewish people. And then, if you need the thing that you're praying for, so then you should put yourself in. The way you say it is, the Jewish people needs health and healing, and I'm also a Jew, and I need health and healing. You put yourself in under the category of the Jewish people. So the fact that you have doesn't mean that you shouldn't pray for all the other people who need. So it's short-sighted in both of those respects. Okay, so now actually we're on page 108, and we did. We had gotten up to Davidic reign, Malchus based Dovid, and we spoke about the Mashiach coming. And we spoke about the mixed metaphor. And on the one hand, it's a plant metaphor called a tzemach and tatzmiach, that's slow and gradual. And blowing the horn is something which could be immediate. One is visual, one is auditory. We spoke about that. And then it says, because we hope for your salvation the whole day. And I pointed out to you that if you look at the 13 principles of faith, which you have, here we go, on page 178, all of the 13 principles of faith are, I believe completely, whatever that means, I'm not going into that now, that such and such is the case. Each one is a different proposition. All except number 12, which is on 180, the next to last one, I believe, commit myself, to the coming of the Mashiach, and even though he delays, with all of that, I wait for him for every day that he should come. So it's the only one of the 13 principles that embodies an attitude. All the rest of them are just a matter of what you believe. Now, before I explain the general idea, I just want to point out to the vocabulary. The Gemara says that the Mashiach won't come on Friday, it won't come on Shabbos, maybe it won't come on Yom Tov either. So how can he say every day? How can he say every day? So the answer is very simple. Just look at the words. It says, I will wait for him every day that he will come. It doesn't say, I wait for him that he will come every day. No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say come every day. It says wait for him every day. I'm waiting for him. I'm hoping for him. I'm looking forward to his coming. That's true every day, every hour. Of course, I know on Friday he's not coming today, but so what? That I'm waiting for Sunday. So there's no contradiction. In the prayer, in the blessing, it says the whole day, all day long. I'm waiting for him to come. Now, how shall I put this in a simple way? Your psychology has connections. It's not divided up into different sections, and each section is its own section. Psychology has connections. It even has logic. There's a logic of the emotions, contrary to what I used to believe, but I read this in the paper in philosophy, and it opened my eyes. Suppose a person says, he says, what's happening tomorrow? George is coming. What time? 7 o'clock. Are you sure? Yeah, I know he's coming. No question about it. George walks in at 7 o'clock. What? George, you're here? Something went wrong. Because he's fully expecting George to be there at 7 o'clock. He shouldn't be surprised when George walks in. It doesn't work that way. The expectation and the surprise don't fit together. There's a breakdown there. There's some contradiction in his reactions. Similarly, somebody says, I know you bought a lottery ticket and there are lots of different prizes. You know, a $200 prize, a $2 million prize, $2 billion. What are you hoping for? I'm hoping for $200. I have modest hopes. I'm not thinking about winning the whole thing, the whole pot. I'm hoping for $200. Fine. Days go by, the lottery numbers are pulled, and you're there with him, and he reads in the paper, That's my number, $200. Boy, am I disappointed. What? Wait a minute. That's what you're hoping for. When you get what you're hoping for, you should be happy. You should be satisfied. You should be, thankful. Why are you disappointed? So you say, something must have changed. Because you can't go from hoping to disappointment. They don't fit together. There's a logic of how the emotions work. Now, let's take belief and emotion. If somebody said, what are you expecting for the weather tomorrow? He says, listen, I'm living in Kentucky. We're expecting tornadoes. Oh, really? You are? Yeah. Very powerful tornadoes. Where do you think they're going to be? In this town. Are you leaving tonight? No. Well, it doesn't frighten you? No. Something's wrong. He's looking down the barrel at a very painful death. Doesn't frighten him? Doesn't bother him? I'm a little suspicious he doesn't really believe it. I'm a little suspicious that he's just saying it. Because if he believed it, then fright would be there. The belief that you're facing overwhelming danger and pain and destruction is tied to an emotion, namely fear. There could be some explanation, but it needs an explanation. It's not obvious. If somebody says, you tell me that you believe the Mashiach is coming and it doesn't express itself in hope, it doesn't express itself in longing, it doesn't express itself in a joyful anticipation, I'm not sure you really believe it. If you really believed that, it would stimulate those emotions. So here, these emotions are a kind of necessary accompaniment of the belief to make the belief realistic. Otherwise, it's hard to explain why you don't have the emotions. I think that's what's going here. Now, could there be emotions associated with some of the other ones? There could be. And why they aren't mentioned, and maybe it's more intense here or more essential here, I think that's what's going on. That it's hard to take seriously the statement that you believe it without the emotions. This is something which is, this general picture of believing or having this emotion connected to that emotion is a category which I don't find discussed very much. That one paper opened my eyes to it. But it has lots of applications. If you tell your child, that's a very terrible thing to do, don't do that, and he does it, and you don't follow up with any consequences, he won't take you seriously. I know you said it was terrible, but if it was really terrible, you'd have done something to prevent it, either to make it impossible for me to do, or to motivate me not to do it by giving me an incentive not to do it, by punishing me in a significant way, so I won't do it again. You say it's terrible and took no consequences at all, it's hard to take you seriously when you say that it's terrible. Terrible things usually excite behavior to make sure that it doesn't happen. And if you're a case, if it doesn't excite that behavior, it's hard to take you seriously. So these things are connected in this kind of way, and that's why I think here it's very important that it be there. Now, we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please bring the Mashiach, because I'm waiting for it, hoping for it all day long. That means I have internalized this idea. I really believe it. It's part of my inner identity and experience. And that is one of the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses as a criterion for bringing this thing about. That's why it's here. So that's obviously that doesn't end the story, but it's at least a start to understanding it. I have heard the idea that one should dedicate the performance of one's mitzvos to the coming of the Mashiach. It may be just my ignorance, but I don't know any source for that. We pray for it 3 times a day on Chol, and there are other times when we mention it, and we should definitely mean it, and think about it, and experience it when you say it. But to dedicate your mitzvahs to the coming of the Mashiach, more so than simply, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do, and I'm doing His will. rather than something else like health or protection or something else, I don't know a source for it. I'm inviting you, if you find a source for it, I'll be happy to hear it. But I'm just mentioning it because I've heard it around, and I don't know a source for it. Okay, now comes a blessing that needs a lot of thought, and I think so some profound things here. First of all, it says, hear our voice, Hashem our God, be gracious and merciful to us, accept in mercy and willingness our prayer. We're asking you to do this because you are a God, here's the Aleph Lamed name, who hears prayer and supplications. And don't turn us away, our King, empty-handed from you. And something else, something new. For you, hear the prayers of your people Israel in mercy. So, as I've indicated, the first sounds like a petition that he should hear our prayers and answer them. And then it says, don't turn us away empty-handed. I suppose if you answered my prayers, you didn't turn me away empty-handed, so it's not obvious why that isn't just redundant. And then, what am I asking for? We had a whole bunch of prayers, each one for a specific petition for something that we need. And here there's nothing specific at all. There's nothing specific at all. So it's not clear what's going on here. And I'll make it even worse. There's the old joke about the king was a prime minister, and he says, you've served me so faithfully, I'll give you three requests. If I'm able to, make 3 requests, and I'll give them to you. The prime minister says, wow, my lucky day. From now on, I want the month of August off, vacation. King says, done. And I want a castle by the sea. King says, done. And the prime minister says, for the 3rd request, please fulfill my first 2 requests. I don't know. If I were the king, I think that was like a joke, and so taking me lightly, is it done in public? I think I would be upset. You wasted one of your requests. We just made a whole long list of requests of things that we need. And now we say, hear our voice and answer us. Well, hear our voice and answer us. All the things that we just asked for? So then, if that's the case, it's just like the 3rd request of the prime minister. You already asked for those things. So I want to give you a mashal, a parable, which may help to understand this. Let's suppose that you desperately need $100, and you have a friend. You go to the friend and say, listen, I need $100. Can you please give me $100? And he says, N-O spells no. Nope. Not giving it to you. Okay. You walk outside, you get to the public street. On the public street is a $100 bill. Baruch Hashem. You have your $100. Is everything okay now? Well, I don't think so, because your friend said no, didn't he? Did you expect that? Don't you feel hurt by that? Don't you wonder now, is he really my friend? He just said no? Not everything's okay. So in your need for the $100, there are really 2 different things going on when you ask your friend. One is you need the $100, and you hope that he'll give it to you. And number 2, you're looking for a confirmation of your friendship. And the scenario that I described, although you end up with the $100 that you need, your friendship is now on the rocks. So you don't have everything that you need. So I think that's part of what's going on here. You're asked for all of the specific needs, whether personal or the needs of the community, or then passing to national needs. You're asked for them all. Those are the specific things that you need, and you're asked for each one. But now you're saying, don't turn me away empty-handed. Not because I'm saying, yeah, and again I need salvation, and again I need money, or again we need the judges. No, I don't want to feel that you just ignored me. Don't turn me away empty-handed as a separate request. Let me feel that I'm important to you and that you are investing in me. That's a separate request. And that's why it's not specific, because it's a different dimension altogether. So it's not really two things. It's that I hear my voice, hear our voice, and receive our prayer, and don't turn us away empty-handed. All this is the petition of prayer and the response as a confirmation of the relationship. So that's one element that's going on here. By the way, this can be used for specific petitions which don't come under the other categories. There was a city, the Gemara tells us, where in summertime they had no water. Now, in this area of the world, the rainy season is in the wintertime. Other places had water. For some reason or other, they had no water. So they were praying for rain. They sent a request to Jerusalem, where should we insert our prayer for rain? As I told you, you pray for the whole people, and then you put yourself under it and say, and we also are Jews, we need. Should we put it in the prayer for support, for physical support, parnasa, or should we put it in here? And they were told, put it in here because the prayer for support, no one else needs rain. So you can't say, everybody needs rain and we are Jews, we also need rain. You can't say it, it's not true. But here the petition is to answer my prayers. Everybody needs that. Everybody needs that all the time. So here you say, answer everyone's prayers, and our prayer is for rain because we happen to need it, and therefore you can put it under the general rubric here. That's a very important distinction. But in general, I think the lesson is the idea of confirming the relationship, and that's why the closing is Blessed Hashem who hears prayer. He hears the prayer. That's what I want to know. That's what I want to feel. Okay? There's one more word I want to talk about. I wrote a whole chapter. This is in my previous book, but I'll just give you a little bit about it. It says here, Kabel berachmim or rotzon, to receive in mercy and how do they translate it here? Compassion and favor. Okay. The word rotzon means a kind of willingness, a kind of identification with. And it is a word that is used over and over again for the acceptability of sacrifices. You ask that the sacrifice be received b'rotzon. Using that word causes a Hebrew reader, someone who knows the vocabulary, to think, is the idea of prayer being described here as if it were a sacrifice? Is that what's going on? Is that what the hint is here? The answer is yes, with a capital Y. Because prayer and sacrifices are very tightly bound up with one another. You probably are aware that the laws of prayer are an imitation, a parallel to the laws of the sacrifices. As it says in the Gemara, Keneged Karbonos Tiknu. When Chazal and Anshe Knesset set up the prayers, they made them to parallel with the prayer, the sacrifices. Not to replace the missing sacrifices, that's dead wrong. They made them to parallel the sacrifices. 3 prayers a day because there are 3 activities of sacrifice a day, an extra prayer on Shabbos because there's an extra sacrifice on Shabbos, then there's certain structures in them. The parallelism is very tightly expressed. Now the question is, where does that come from? Where does the idea that the prayers should be connected to the sacrifices? So I'll show you one source in a verse that you can find here, and then I'll tell you about another one, that the rabbis of the Great Assembly who did it weren't making anything up. They weren't inventing anything. Shabbos, oh Shabbos. That's it. You have it here. No, you don't. This is it. Okay, slichos, here we are. Yeah, there we go. So it's on page 830. This is a very famous verse because it's put to music into the famous song. At the very bottom of the page, 830 or 831, V'haviosim el har kodshi, I, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, will bring them to my holy mountain. V'simachtim b'beis tefilasi, and I will cause them to rejoice in my house of prayer. Their sacrifices will be l'ratzon, accepted willingly on my altar. Ki, for Beisi, Beis Tefillah, Yikarei l'chol ha'amim, because my house will be called the house of prayer for all the nations. Now, you read that, your hair ought to be standing on end. Because it starts off by calling the house of prayer. And then it says, what are you going to do in this house of prayer? Oh, we're going to offer sacrifices. That's what we're going to do. And it says, because it's called the house of prayer. What is that supposed to mean? This is Isaiah the prophet, you know. He's telling us something very profound here. The place where sacrifices are offered is called the house of prayer. By the way, there is no title for the temple which calls it a house of sacrifices. None. It has a lot of titles, but not that. It's only called house of prayer. That's really quite remarkable, no? Now, Isaiah is towards the end of the first temple period. Let's go back to the beginning of the first temple. Solomon makes the temple. When he's finished making it, he dedicates it. 3 chapters, the beginning of the first book of Kings. I think it's chapters 4, 5, and 6, or 5, 6, and 7. And he talks about what's going to happen there. What's going to happen in the temple. The only activity he mentions is prayer. Sof pasuk. Not a hint that there will be any sacrifices there. Only prayer. You'll pray in it, and God will hear you and answer you. You'll pray elsewhere and think that the prayers will go to the temple and up to heaven because that's where the connection is. You'll do it that way. Jews will pray and God should answer them. Non-Jews will pray and God should answer them. The whole thing is about prayer. That's when it was first dedicated. So there's something very profound going on here. The men of the Great Assembly just imitated that idea, which is much, much older than their institutions that were set up at the beginning of the Second Temple. Now the basic idea, I say, is a chapter in my book, The Informed Soul. So you can look there for the proofs and the various connections. But the basic idea is that when you come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in prayer, you come to offer yourself to Him. You're offering yourself as an offering to Him. I belong to you. You are my master. You are my creator. And I'm offering all of what I am to you. And indeed, the petitions that we make are made in the spirit of, I want to serve you, and these are the means that I need to be able to serve you. That's the spirit in which the petitions are made. So that when you ask, when you're only asking for a means by which you can serve Him, the asking itself is an expression of offering yourself. I'll give you 2 analogies. We're fighting a war now. Imagine a soldier who's firing bullets at the enemy, and he's running out of bullets. So he calls back, helicopter drop, bullets! Coming right up, 30 seconds. The helicopter comes over, they drop, it comes down in a little parachute, this big box of bullets. Thanks, guys! Look at that, they gave him bullets. Isn't he lucky? He has a whole box of bullets. No! He wants to shoot at the enemy. He needs the bullets to shoot at the enemy. Who's serving who? Who's doing who a favor here? Who's on whose payroll here? He's shooting the bullets in order to win the war for the army. It's not that they gave him a gift and he's now richer because he has a box of bullets. It's just the means. So when he asks for the bullets, he's not asking for a present. He's expressing his desire to do for the army the best that he can do, and he wants a means to be able to do it. Similarly, if you're working for IBM and your job is to simulate the airflow in 3 dimensions, and you're working with a 2-year-old chip, and you say to them, the key keeps crashing and it won't cover. I have to cover 6 dimensions at one time, and it only does 4. Give me a new chip. Call Intel. Give me a new chip so I can do a better job. I think 2 weeks later, say, you got it. The new chip is installed. Did he get a gift? He got a work tool with which he can do a better job for IBM. Asking for the Intel chip is not like asking for a new room in your house. It's asking for a tool to serve IBM better. It means you're expressing your loyalty and fidelity to IBM by asking for it. So we too, when we come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our petitions, I wouldn't say this is the most exalted level, but it's a very good level, where you can ask for something, and you imagine the Malach, the angel, is taking your prayers up and says, by the way, why do you want that? Be ready with an answer. I want to do this mitzvah. I'm not able to do it without this. That's why I'm asking for it. And when you do that, you're offering yourself as a korban to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as a sacrifice. And that's an expression of the idea that prayer and sacrifices are of the same type. I'll just finish up with one more idea, but as I say, in the chapters, a lot of more material. What happened before the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, before the men of the Great Assembly, the beginning of the Second Temple? What happened? What about the sacrifices? A Jew, was he connected to the sacrifices? July 16th. Was he connected? He says, sure, I'm connected. I gave my dues. In Adar, I gave a half shekel. Once a year, we pay our dues. So on July 16th, I might sleep till noon, but the priests are there, and they're offering the sacrifices, and my name is written on the sacrifices because I paid my dues 3 months ago. So one of the things that Anshe Knesset Gedolah said was, that's not enough. It's not just to pay your dues and sleep until noon. We want there to be a joint national institution of sacrifice, that the nation as a whole should sacrifice itself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The actual physical animal sacrifices in the temple are one aspect, and prayer is another aspect of the same gesture, the same meaning. And we want it to be conscious and participatory. And therefore we want prayers to be going on at the same time when the sacrifices are being made in the temple, because it's all one joint institution. That's one way to look at what the Anshe Knesset Gedolah did in setting up the prayers to be parallel to the sacrifices. So, that's just on the word ratzon, and you saw the word ratzon in the verse from Isaiah. Yula ratzon al mizbechi. Ratzon means acceptable as a sacrifice because the prayers really are sacrifices. A question, Mary?
So, when we're saying that the korban is like some source of awakening certain aspects of our own prayer, like through the process of the korban, it awakens certain, let's say, emotional aspects of prayers or intellectual. Like, is it like a?
So now you're saying something very interesting. Now I was saying it the other way, but you're saying it the other way. Let's think about that. Because I was saying that you should understand prayers as sacrifices. You're saying you should understand sacrifices as prayers. That's what you're saying. Now, but that's not bad at all, because the name of the house is a house of prayer. I think that the way I said it has to be right, and I think that it's not a contradiction, because you have to be able to see in prayers themselves that they are sacrifices. And then the animal sacrifices are a way of expressing what's implicit in the prayer, not the other way around. I think that because the house is called a base tefillah, it's called a house of prayer, and what goes on there is sacrifices. But the key concept is prayer, and I'm just explaining how animal sacrifices could be related to prayer, because the act of saying the prayers is an act of offering yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's how I'm making a connection between the two of them. But the more fundamental idea is prayer. So the sacrifices have to be, yeah. Okay. I may just make it more complicated if I say it again. Okay, so now back to work. Yeah, so now comes, well, it's here, redemption, but, let's translate it, and then I'll explain what it's going. Oh no, I'm in the wrong place. I'm sorry. Not redemption. So, wrong place. We're on page 110. So, ritzei. Yes, ritzei is the same word as ratzon. Same word. That's right. Hashem our God, with your people Israel and their prayer. So, this now is saying out in much more detail what I said in the one word ratzon in the previous prayer. This, a previous blessing, this now says it, ritzei, accept with favor your people Israel and their prayer. Now look at that. If the prayer itself is an offering, so then I understand you say, please accept the prayer in favor. But it says, accept in favor your people. That means the prayer is a vehicle of offering the people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why we ask that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should accept in favor the people as a whole, not just the words of their mouths, not just the performance of the prayer. Here it's very profound. And now we say, restore the service to the Holy of Holies, your temple. So, what's the connection? You should be pleased with us and restore the service, because it's two halves of one whole. And we're missing one half. So we did the prayer part, and now we're asking Kodesh Baruch Hu to accept the prayer, the act of prayer, as an offering to Him. But we know that it was supposed to be connected to the sacrifices, and we miss the other half. And this you say on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. You say this in every prayer. Immediately, when you ask that the prayer be accepted, you ask for the restore of the rebuilding of the temple. And of course, when the men of the Great Assembly made these prayers at the beginning of the second temple, they didn't say this, did they? They didn't have to ask for the rebuilding of the temple. They had the temple standing. So what they prayed for was the protection of the temple, or the continuation of the temple, or something else that had to be changed after the temple was destroyed. Now there's a punctuation problem here, which I'll probably go into tomorrow, and the fiery offerings of Israel and their prayer with love, except again b'ratzon. So this ratzon is said now twice, and it should be l'ratzon a third time. Continuously, the service of Israel, your people. And we should see the restoration of your returning to Zion in mercy. So you see that the prayer is tied up with the sacrifices here. It's all one subject, and we have one part and we don't have the other part. Let me explain that part to you, and then maybe I'll end for today and I'll do the rest of it tomorrow because it's complicated. I told you the Gemara says that they made the sacrifices to correspond, the prayers to correspond to the sacrifices. And I made a point of saying that it doesn't say in place of, which is historically not true, because they were made at the beginning of the Second Temple. But in the Shulchan Aruch, it does say in place of. Usually, the Shulchan Aruch would quote the Gemara if it would say what he wanted it to say. Why would he change the words of the Gemara? See, here's an idea. I want you to imagine that you have an amateur football team, 11 guys, and you play against other teams regularly. You're supposed to have a game, and it comes time for the game to start, and you only have 9 guys. So the other team says, I guess you want to forfeit because your team isn't here. And suppose that the 9 guys say, we'll play against you with 9. We'll play against you. You have 11. You can have your 11. Our 9 will do the job of the 11. I said, what does that mean? You're missing 2. But the subset is going to stand in for the whole. I think that's what's going here. What's going on here is, as I've said now 6 times, you have prayers and sacrifices, and they form a single integrated institution. Now we have only prayers. We don't have sacrifices. So the Shulchan Aruch is saying now prayer alone has to stand in for prayer and sacrifices. It's a subset standing in for the whole. The Gemara is talking about the origin of the laws. The origin of the laws is to make them parallel. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about how I should look at my performance of prayer now. It has a double job. It has the job to do its own part in the compound institution and also to fill in for the missing part of the institution. So I think that could be what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. And that's why you would have the change in vocabulary. So here, okay, I'll tell you this one thing about punctuation. I can just do it in the time. Back to the beginning of the blessing, right? Should be pleased with us and with our prayer, the prayer of the Jewish people, and restore the service to the Holy of Holies of your house. Now it says, and Ishei Yisrael, the burnt offerings of Israel. And then it says, and their prayer shall be, you should accept in love and willing. So now you have an interesting structure here. You have return to your house. Then you have 2 things, the burnt offerings of Israel and their prayer. And then you have another verb, accept in with will. So you got verb, 2 nouns, and verb. How do you split it up? Strictly speaking, you could do it, you could have the 2 nouns go with the first and not the second, or 2 nouns go with the second, or you could split it in the middle. You're free to do it. You see what your translator did here. He put a period after the first. Return the service to the holy of your house, period. That's the end of that sentence. Now, the burnt offerings of Israel and their prayer you should accept with willingness. Now, really? The burnt offerings? Now you have a problem. What are the burnt offerings that we're offering now? What are the burnt offerings that we're offering now that we could ask to be accepted now? And some say it's those who are sacrificed, are killed, are burned. Those offerings throughout history, which we saw 3 weeks ago. Or the souls of people who lived their lives for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just consumed their whole lives in serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the way you would read it if it's now. If you move the period one phrase later, then it would read, restore the service to the Holy of Holies of your house and the burnt offerings of Israel, comma. And then the burnt offerings are what we're asking to be restored. And then it would be just the animals that are being burnt up. So the Pritzadik, someone whom my Rabbi Zatzal always told us to read, Pritzadik says, read it both ways. When you read it, have it in mind both ways. That the burnt offerings could be the animals and go together with the restore in the prior part of the verse of the words, or it can be those who have died and those who have been burnt, or those who lived their lives, in service of Gottleib Baruch Hu, should be accepted even now. Have both things in mind when you say it.